Welcome back to the horror storytelling channel Bong Toi Trong Dem. Today, I'm honored to introduce a ghost story titled The Wronged Spirit of Lan. The cry echoing from the Melaleuca forest. Before we begin, if you find this story chilling, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to support my work. Thank you for listening. Now, let's get started. The wind from the Melaleuca forest carried with it the pungent scent of wet soil and decaying leaves. The crescent moon cast a dim light on the murky waters of the Zhang Canal. Nights in Cat Tuong village were always thick with the sounds of insects and frogs. Blending into a mournful, endless symphony, the elders of the village often warned, after 8 o'clock at night, no one should step into the forest, or they may be led astray by spirits and demons. That warning had been etched deep into the minds of generations, leaving Cat Tuong in a state of restless sleep. On the day Lan became a bride, the sky was unusually clear. She was a 20-year-old girl with a round face and fair skin that stood out in the courtyard of the La family. Dressed in a white ao dye, her long braided hair fell neatly down her back. The entire village whispered about her beauty and gentle nature, admiring her hard-working spirit, though her family could only offer a few simple trays of fruit. The wedding was still lively. People praised her husband, Tam, as a lucky man to have married such a virtuous wife. In his youth, Tam was a lively young man, sun-kissed with a bright smile. On their wedding day, he held Lan's hand tightly and led her to the canal to wash their faces for good fortune. Lan gazed at her reflection shimmering on the water's surface, her heart brimming with hope. She knew her husband's family wasn't wealthy, but she believed that as long as they stood together, their life would be peaceful and warm. But joy never lasted long. Just a week after the wedding, Lan's mother-in-law, Mrs. Han, began to reveal her displeasure. A widowed woman hardened by life, she was strict and accustomed to ruling the household. Her harsh words often cut deep into Lan's heart. A girl from the floodplains. Dressed like that? How could you think it's proper? This house is not a place for flashy or shameless behavior. Lan said nothing, always humble and cautious, hoping to keep the peace. But the more she endured, the more Mrs. Han pressed, scrutinizing every tiny gesture of hers. One afternoon, as Lan was tending the fire, Mrs. Han walked past, frowning. What kind of cooking is this? Smoke everywhere? Do you want the whole house filled with soot? Lan quickly pushed the wood aside, tears welling in her eyes. Tam, who was sitting on the porch mending his nets, only glanced over and said nothing. He no longer defended his wife as he once did. Days passed. Lan grew accustomed to waking before dawn, collecting rainwater in the yard, sweeping, and preparing meals for the family. She tried her best to please her mother-in-law, but Mrs. Han never seemed satisfied. Whenever visitors came, she would complain, raising her is like raising a shadow. So soft-spoken it's irritating. And she can't even keep the house in order. Lan could only bow her head and swallow her sighs. One day at the market, Lan overheard the gossip of the village women. Hey, did you know? Lately, Tam's been going to town to meet Tui, the daughter of Mr. Hoi, you know, the really rich family. Yeah, I've seen them. She's pretty but flirtatious. Looks like she actually likes him. Lan's heart twisted in pain. When she got home, she quietly asked her husband, Tam, where have you been going at night lately? Avoiding her eyes, he answered curtly, drinking with friends. You just stay home and take care of the meals. Though filled with doubt, Lan stayed silent, but a few days later, she froze at the sight of Tam riding past the village gate with Tui. Tui was laughing sweetly, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The two looked painfully intimate. That night, Lan gathered all her courage to confront him. Are you involved with Tui? Tam snapped. Who's been feeding you nonsense? You can't even manage the house and now you're spying on me? His cold words cut like knives. Lan's voice trembled. I'm just afraid of losing you. Tam threw down the basket he was weaving and stormed out, leaving her in tears. From then on, Tam came home less often. When drunk, he turned harsh, sometimes raising his hand against her over cold rice or a dim oil lamp. Lan wept silently at night, yet by morning she rose again to work without complaint. One morning while sweeping the yard, she felt an unusual fatigue and nausea. She went to see the village midwife, who smiled kindly after examining her. "Good news, child, the baby is about a month along." Overjoyed, Lan held her belly, believing the child would bring Tam's love back. That evening, she told her husband, "Tam, I'm pregnant." He froze, but instead of joy, his face hardened. "Pregnant now? The house is poor. Where will we find money to raise it?" Lan stared in disbelief. "This is your child, how can you say that?" He scoffed. "We'll see. Who says it's mine?" Lan's world spun. Before she could respond, Mrs. Han emerged from her room. "This house is already miserable. And now you're bringing another mouth to feed? Don't think being pregnant makes you queen of this family." Lan bit her lip, clutching her belly as tears streamed down. Still, she swore to protect her child at all costs. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind sweeping through the Melaleuca forest. The rustle of leaves whispering like distant voices. An uneasy chill crept into her heart. She did not know it then, but tragedy had already begun to unfold over her life. Ever since Lan announced her pregnancy, the atmosphere in the La household had grown heavier. Tam rarely came home, and when he did, it was only to gulp down a quick meal before leaving again. Mrs. Han kept her icy expression, always throwing in sharp remarks that left Lan choking back tears. One morning, Lan went to the market to buy some snakehead fish for braising. The village market of Kat Tuong sat right by the riverbank, with rows of stalls roofed in simple palm leaves, always buzzing with chatter and laughter. Just as Lan finished choosing a bundle of vegetables, she overheard a group of women gossiping at the fish stall. "I saw Tam the other day taking Twee to town to buy fabric. She was clinging to his waist the whole ride. And I heard Mr. Hoi plans to marry Twee off to Tam so he won't have to hire someone to manage the rice storehouse." Poor Lan, newlywed and already betrayed. Lan froze, her hands trembling as she gripped the basket. Her face burned hot with blood. She turned away and hurried home, her mind in turmoil. That night, when Tam stumbled back reeking of alcohol, Lan couldn't hold it in any longer. "You've been seeing Twee again, haven't you?" Tam's eyes flared. "Who told you that? The whole market saw you. Do you think I made it up?" Tam slammed his bowl down on the tray. "Who I go with is my business. Stop nagging." Lan's words caught in her throat as tears streamed down her face. From inside, Mrs. Han stepped out, her voice sharp as a blade. "A good wife doesn't argue with her husband. Keep this up and if he leaves you, you'll deserve it." That night, Tam didn't sleep in their room but rolled out a mat on the porch instead. Lan lay alone, listening to the chirp of crickets and the howl of a dog at the gate. She held her belly, feeling the baby's faint kicks, as if pleading with her not to give up. The next day, she brought food to the fields for Tam, but before she could call out, she saw him standing under the shade of a Melaleuca tree, laughing and talking with Twee. They stood so close that when the wind blew Thai's conical hat off, Tam quickly picked it up and placed it back on her head. Lan's heart clenched tight. She returned home, sweat soaking through her back. Seeing her, Mrs. Han smirked. "Don't think you can keep Tam with that baby. He's young, he has the right to choose whoever he wants." Lan bit her lip. "No matter what, I am his lawful wife. I only asked to give birth to this child." Mrs. Han narrowed her eyes. "So you think bearing a child will tie him down? Dream on." Lan said nothing more. She retreated into her room, cradling her belly in silence. Her mother-in-law's words cut into her heart like knives. Days later, Tam finally returned. Drunk, he dragged Lan out into the yard, shouting, "I told you, stay out of my business. That belly of yours might not even be mine." Lan's voice cracked with pain. "How can you say that? I've never betrayed you." Tam slapped her across the face, sending her sprawling onto the ground. Lan sat up, clutching her face, but no tears came this time. She knew now, the man before her had completely changed. One afternoon, Twee suddenly came to the house. She wore a purple ba blouse, lips painted bright red, and carried a basket of fruit. As soon as she saw Lan, Twee smiled. "Sister Lan, how are you? I just came by to visit Mother Han for a bit." Lan stiffened. Mrs. Han welcomed Twee warmly, as if greeting an honored guest, pouring tea and laughing as she spoke. "See, Twee is such a thoughtful girl, caring about her future mother-in-law, not like someone else here, who sulks all day long." Twee glanced at Lan's slightly rounded belly. "You're expecting, so you should really take care of yourself. But I heard you've been weak lately. Maybe you won't even be able to carry it to term." The vague remark sent a chill down Lan's spine. That night, as Lan lay in bed, she overheard the voices of her husband and mother-in-law talking outside. "Mrs. Han, we need to deal with this quickly. If that child is born, it'll cause trouble." Tam's low voice. "I'll handle it. The village midwife has a simple remedy. Just need to take her there." Lan lay still, her heart pounding. She realized they were plotting against her. The next day, Mrs. Han feigned illness and told Lan to go into the forest to gather medicinal leaves. In the Melaleuca forest there's a kind of leaf that cools the body. "Bring some back and boil it for me. Go with Tam so I'll feel reassured." Lan hesitated. "The forest paths are dangerous." "Mother," Mrs. Han snapped. "Dangerous? Everyone in the village goes to pick leaves. What's there to be afraid of?" Not wanting to argue, Lan nodded. That afternoon, the sky grew heavy, thick with black clouds. Wind howled from the forest, scattering leaves everywhere. Tam rowed the boat, ferrying her across. He didn't say a word, his eyes fixed coldly ahead. Lan sat clutching her belly, her mind tangled with fear. She watched the rows of Melaleuca trees reflected in the canal, the soft lapping of water against the boat's side. An ominous sense of dread made her shiver. When they reached the bank, Tam jumped out first and held out his hand to pull her ashore. They walked deeper into the forest, along damp narrow trails, mud clinging to their feet. The sky darkened further, and the eerie call of an owl echoed. Lan whispered, "Do you know where the leaves are?" Tam gave no reply. Soon, they reached the banks of the Zhang Canal. The water churned, murky and swirling. Tam stopped and turned to face Lan. His gaze was dark, filled with something strange. Lan instinctively stepped back, a sudden fear rising within her without knowing why. Rain began to fall in a fine mist, the smell of damp earth rising heavy in the air. The Melaleuca forest darkened, only a few pale streaks of light slipping through the canopy. The insects fell silent, leaving only the wind, howling through the branches like a mournful cry. Lan stood at the edge of the canal, both hands clutching her belly. Her heart pounded furiously. Tam stared at her for a long moment before his voice rumbled, low and hoarse. "Lan, this marriage ends here." Lan froze. What are you saying?" Tam clenched his fists. "I don't love you anymore. I want to marry Twee. Go back to your mother's house and live there." Lan shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't leave. I'm carrying your child. How can you abandon us?" Tam cast his eyes toward the muddy waters, his voice icy cold. "That child should never be born." Lan held her belly tighter, stepping back. "No, the baby is innocent." Suddenly, Tam lunged forward, his rough hand clamping down on her arm. Lan struggled, her voice breaking. "Don't do this, please, I beg you." The rain poured harder, pounding against the canal's surface. The wind roared, drowning out Lan's sobs. Tam growled, "It's too late." With a violent shove, he pushed her. Lan staggered, her feet slipping in the mud. She plunged into the canal, water exploding in a spray. "Help, Tam, please save me." Her voice rang out through the storm. But Tam stood rigid on the bank, his face hard, eyes vacant. Lan thrashed in the muddy current, clawing at the branches of Melaleuca lining the edge. But the slick mud gave way beneath her grip. The weight of her belly dragged her deeper. She tried to gasp for air, but water rushed into her mouth, tasting of rotten silt. In her desperation, she saw Tam's figure fading into the curtain of rain. A sharp branch scraped across her cheek, tearing skin, blood seeping into the swirling water. Lan fought one last time. In that fleeting instant, She felt her baby stir inside her womb. Tears mingled with the rain. A wave of burning hatred surged within her chest. She opened her eyes, fixing one final look on the face of the husband who had betrayed her. The canal swallowed her whole, the surface smooth, leaving only faint ripples. The rain continued to fall, erasing every trace. Tam stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. Then he turned away, hurrying out of the forest, leaving the darkness to consume the place of his crime. The next morning, the sky was clear. Villagers found Tam's boat tied at the landing, but there was no sign of Lan. When asked, Tam lied. Lan missed her family, so she went back to her mother's house. The villagers muttered doubts but dared not press further. Mrs. Han only sighed. If she's gone, so be it. One less mouth to feed makes the house lighter. But a few days later, something strange happened. On a rainy night, Mrs. Tu, the fish seller, was pulling in her nets at a stretch of canal near the Melaleuca forest when she suddenly heard the heart-wrenching cries of a woman. The sound drifted through the mist, sometimes close, sometimes far, sending chills down her spine. Pale with fear, she hurriedly rowed her boat back home, gasping, "I heard a woman crying at the Zhang Canal." It was a real human voice, not the call of a bird. The rumor spread quickly through the village. People whispered that Lan's spirit had not yet found peace, and that each night she returned, weeping in search of her child. At the Le household, nights were filled with the long, mournful howls of dogs. Tam could not sleep. Once, he dreamed of Lan standing at the bedroom door, her long hair drenched, water dripping steadily onto the floor. She said nothing, only cradled her belly while staring at him with pitch-black eyes. He jolted awake, his back soaked with sweat. Yet the smell of river mud lingered faintly in the house. Mrs. Han too began to experience eerie things. One morning, the offering bowl of rice placed on the ancestral altar bore the imprint of a tiny hand. Though no one had touched it during the night, while washing dishes, she heard the sound of someone breathing right behind her. She turned, but there was no one. One evening, she heard the creaking of a hammock on the porch. Stepping outside, she froze in terror. The hammock swayed on its own. A shadowy figure of a woman sat there faintly, her hair hanging loose over her face, water dripping to the ground. Trembling, Mrs. Han backed away, but the shadow whispered, "Give me back my child." She screamed, collapsing to the floor. Tam rushed out, finding his mother pale, pointing at the now empty hammock. From that day forward, the house was cloaked in dread. At dusk, the wind from the Melaleuca forest howled like the cries of the grieving. Lan had returned, not in flesh, but in the depths of her vengeance. And this was only the beginning. Ever since the night Mrs. Han saw the shadowy figure in the hammock, the Le household had turned unnaturally cold. It wasn't the ordinary chill of a rainy countryside night, but a damp, seeping cold that leaked from the wooden walls and crept deep into the bones. The very first night after that event, Tam was asleep when he heard the faint drip of water. He stirred, listening carefully. The sound came from the corner of the house, near the large clay jar of rainwater by the kitchen. Lighting the oil lamp, he slowly walked over. The jar was still full, but the earthen floor around it was soaked, marked with clear footprints, small, like those of a woman. They led straight from the yard into the house, stopping at the water jar before vanishing. Tam froze, whispering to himself, "Must have overflowed," but unease gnawed at him. The next morning, Mrs. Han went to cook rice. Lifting the lid of the pot, she recoiled. The surface of the rice bore the imprint of a small hand. The fingers were thin, caked with mud, as if pressed into the rice while it was still steaming hot. Panicked, she slammed the lid shut and stumbled outside. "Tam, I'm telling you, Lan has come back." Tam frowned. "Don't talk nonsense, Mother. Probably just a cat jumped on it." "That wasn't a cat. I saw it, clear as day, a human hand. I told you, she died unjustly. She won't let this rest." By afternoon, strange stories spread through the village again. Old man Nam, who rowed his boat past the Melaleuca forest, told others, "I saw a white figure standing on the canal bank, hair down to her knees. Thought it was a village girl catching fish. I called out a few times, but no reply. Rode closer, and there was no one there. The rumor spread quickly. Villagers began avoiding that part of the canal after dark. The La household became a place no one dared to visit, especially once the sun went down. On the third night, though the sky was clear, the wind from the forest shrieked like the wailing of a woman. In his dream, Tam saw Lan standing in the middle of the Zhang Canal, her body drenched, clutching her belly. It swelled larger and heavier, until from within came the sorrowful cries of a baby. He woke with a jolt, his body ice cold, sweat soaking his shirt. From the porch came the slow creaking of the hammock. Taking the oil lamp, he stepped outside. The hammock swayed gently though the air was still. Mrs. Han fared no better. Every night she heard whispers against her ear as she tried to sleep. Once, while eating dinner, she suddenly saw clumps of black mud rising in her soup, writhing like worms. She screamed, but when Tam rushed in, the bowl contained only clear broth. "She's haunting me." Mrs. Han trembled. "She wants to drag me with her." Tam snapped, shouting in frustration, "There are no ghosts. Stop imagining things. .. But just as the words left his mouth, a sudden cold wind swept through, snuffing out the oil lamp. In the suffocating darkness, both of them heard the steady drip of water right behind them. When they relit the lamp, clear wet streaks marked the earthen floor, footprints, as though someone had walked straight in from the door and stopped right where mother and son were standing. Mrs. Han screamed, "Lan, please forgive me." Her cry echoed through the night, waking several neighbors. Lamps flickered on in nearby homes, and wary eyes turned toward the La household. Some of the older women muttered, "She's back, a wronged soul indeed." The next day, Tam sat drinking with his friends at the tavern. One of them cautioned, "Maybe you should bring in a shaman to perform a rite. Help her spirit move on. Otherwise, none of you will ever have peace." Tam took a long swig of liquor, his voice rough. "There are no ghosts. My mother's just weak-hearted." But deep inside, fear gnawed at him. At night, he no longer dared to sleep without the lamp on. Even with its dim glow, he still heard the wet slap of footsteps circling the house, like someone drenched to the bone. One evening at dusk, Twee came to visit. She wore a thin silk blouse, her hair tied neatly, the heavy scent of perfume clinging to her. As soon as she saw Tam, she cooed, "You look so worn out. Haven't been sleeping well, have you?" Tam glanced around nervously, worried that the villagers might see. But in the end, he still brought Twee inside. They sat in the front room while Mrs. Han poured tea. "Seeing Twee makes me glad," she said. "Since the day Lan left, this house has known no peace." Twee curled her lip. "I've heard people say Lan died unjustly, that her spirit hasn't passed on. But honestly, what can a ghost do to the living?" No sooner had she finished than the teacup in Mrs. Han's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. The three of them froze. A cold draft swept through, and the window creaked open on its own. Thai's face went pale. She jumped up. "I'm leaving. This place makes my skin crawl." Tam walked her to the gate, but as he turned back toward the house, a baby's cry floated from the direction of the forest. Thin, drawn out, slicing through the night, shivers ran down his spine as he rushed back inside and bolted the door. The La household reeked of dampness. Even in the middle of the dry season, the earthen floor stayed wet and clammy. Lying down, Tam could hear every drop of water falling from the thatched roof. He pulled the blanket over his head, but the wailing continued. In her room, Mrs. Han sat huddled, whispering frantic prayers. "Lan, I beg you, forgive me. I'm old. I can't bear this anymore." But the crying only grew louder, as if answering her plea. That night, neither mother nor son slept, and outside in the darkness, a pair of eyes glowed red like burning embers, watching from the porch. After the teacup shattered on its own, Twee returned home shaken. She lay in bed but couldn't fall asleep. The sound of a baby's crying from the previous night echoed endlessly in her mind. Around midnight, she dreamed she was standing in the middle of the Melaleuca forest. Thick mist blanketed everything, and the water at her feet was icy cold. A voice whispered softly, calling her name. Twee, Twee. A figure emerged from the fog, thin, frail, hair hanging loose to cover its face. Twee backed away, but the figure crept closer. When it was only a few steps away, it lifted its head. Lan's face appeared, pale, bloated, swollen as though dragged up from the canal. Water dripped steadily from her hair. Twee screamed and jolted awake, her back drenched in sweat. Gasping for breath, she tried to calm herself. But then, from beneath the bed, came the faint cry of a baby. No, impossible. Twee trembled. The cry grew louder, right under the floorboards. She knelt down cautiously to look. A tiny, pale hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed her ankle. Twee shrieked, yanking her leg back and collapsing onto the floor. When she looked again, the space beneath the bed was empty. Nothing but shadows. The next morning, Twee went to the household with dark circles under her eyes. The moment Tam saw her, he asked, "What's wrong? You look like you've lost your soul." Clutching him, Thai's voice shook. "Tam, I saw Lan. She came for me. She wants to drag me with her." Hearing this, Mrs. Han's face went pale. "I told you, her spirit hasn't moved on. She's come back to take revenge on all of us." Tam snapped angrily. "Stop bringing her up. Talking like this only makes things worse." But Twee shuddered, feeling as if someone was standing right behind her, watching. She turned, but no one was there. From that day forward, she became deeply haunted. Every time she looked into a mirror, her reflection twisted, her skin turned deathly pale, her eyes sunken, her hair limp and dripping wet. Once, as she combed her hair, whole clumps came loose, scattering across the floor. She screamed and hurled the comb away. A foul, rotten stench began to cling to her body. No matter how much she bathed, she smelled like a corpse long drowned in water. Family members gradually avoided her, whispering that whenever she entered a room, a strange chill and the musty odor of decay followed. One night, Twee was too afraid to sleep alone, so she stayed at the household. Mrs. Han laid out a mat for her in the middle room. Tam carefully locked the doors and lit extra incense to ward off spirits. Around midnight, Twee heard the hammock creaking on the porch. She trembled violently and whispered, "Mrs. Han, do you hear that?" Mrs. Han sat in silence, her face pale. The hammock went still. Then came the sound of wet, dragging footsteps entering the house. Slosh, slosh. Summoning her courage, Twee looked toward the doorway. A white figure stood there, hair hanging loose, covering its face. Water dripped steadily to the floor, pooling beneath its feet. Slowly, the figure raised its head, revealing eyes glowing red, staring unblinking. Twee screamed and bolted toward the back door. But just as she reached it, an icy hand clamped down on her shoulder. Panicked, she tore free and fled headlong into the darkness of the Melaleuca forest. Mrs. Han and Tam gave chase, but all they saw was her silhouette vanishing among the trees. Her screams echoed through the forest, then fell silent. They searched all night but found nothing. At dawn, a boatman reported a body floating in the Zhang Canal. Pulled ashore, Twee was found dead, clutching a Melaleuca branch tightly, her eyes wide open in frozen terror. Villagers whispered, Lan's spirit dragged her away. Poor girl, her retribution came too soon. From that day on, the household grew darker still. Mrs. Han was driven nearly mad, while Tam drowned himself in drink to escape his fear. Yet every night, the sound of a baby's cry and the creak of the hammock echoed through the house, reminding them that the blood debt was far from settled. The death of Twee left the people of Kat Tuong village too terrified to go near the household. Whispers spread that Lan's spirit had returned, taking each of them one by one. Mrs. Han became distraught. She no longer went to the market, nor did she scold her neighbors as she used to. Day after day, she sat huddled before the family altar, burning incense and mumbling prayers. At night, she buried herself under a blanket, but the faint cries of a baby still echoed by her ears. One evening, Tam stumbled home drunk. Just as he stepped through the gate, he heard the hammock creaking on the porch. He scowled and shouted, "Lan, if you have the guts, show yourself to me." The moment his challenge ended, the hammock went still, A gust of cold wind swept through, snuffing out the oil lamp inside. Darkness swallowed everything. From the courtyard came the sound of wet footsteps. Slowly advancing, Tam backed away until his back pressed against a wooden post. A pungent, fishy stench filled his nose. "Lan, is that you?" His voice cracked. No answer, only the steady dripping of water. Closer and closer. Suddenly, an icy hand touched his neck. Tam screamed and bolted into the bedroom. Mrs. Han, startled by his cry, scrambled up and lit a lamp. Its faint glow revealed a trail of wet marks stretching from the door straight into the bedroom. That night, Mrs. Han dared not sleep. Around midnight, she heard the sound of a child giggling inside the house. Shivering, she listened as the laughter turned into pitiful sobbing. She sat up and saw a figure crouched in the corner. Hair hanging loose, back turned toward her. Trembling, she stammered, "Lan, is that you?" The figure slowly turned its head. Lan's face appeared, ghastly white, blood oozing from her eye sockets. Mrs. Han shrieked and toppled backward. Don't take me." But Lan said nothing. She rose to her feet and walked slowly toward her, pointing at her swollen belly as though about to give birth. Mrs. Han screamed and fled into the yard. Outside, the forest wind howled, and the cry of an owl pierced the night. Mrs. Han collapsed to her knees, banging her head to the ground. "Forgive me, I beg you, don't come back again." At that instant, the wind ceased, but from the ground, wet clumps of mud slithered around her feet. She shrieked and ran back inside. The next morning, she went to the canal to make an offering, tossing in a boiled chicken and a bowl of rice wine, whispering, "Lan, take this food and drink. Spare me." Yet when she lifted the pot of rice for their meal, a handprint was pressed into the surface, smeared with black mud. Terrified, she abandoned the food, too afraid to eat. In the nights that followed, Lan began appearing in her dreams. She would stand at the door, hair dripping wet, water falling onto the mat. Each night, she drew closer, first at the doorway, then sitting at the edge of the bed, and finally straddling her chest. Staring into her eyes, Mrs. Han screamed until her voice went hoarse. Villagers heard her cries but no one dared approach. Meanwhile, Tam deteriorated. He no longer dared sleep in the bedroom, laying his mat in the front room with every light burning. But even then, the lamps would suddenly flicker out, plunging him into thick darkness, where footsteps and the faint lull of a ghostly song surrounded him. Oh, the wind sways the banana leaves. The lullaby was cold, mournful, echoing as if from the underworld. He covered his ears, but the voice seeped through. Scratch marks appeared on his arms, bleeding, though he never saw what caused them. One night, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, he felt something crawling across his chest. He shot up in horror. Black mud streaked his torso, and tiny handprints, like those of a child, were pressed into his skin. He screamed and ran outside. In the middle of the yard stood Lan's figure, motionless. At her feet, water pooled, reflecting the dim moonlight. Trembling, Tam backed away. Lan only extended her hand toward him, beckoning silently. His whole body went cold, his mind reeling. "Mother, save me," he cried out. Mrs. Han rushed out, but the moment she saw Lan's shadow, she collapsed in a faint. All through that night, the hammock creaked without pause. Villagers swore they heard the cries of a baby coming from the La household, echoing until dawn. When morning came, Mrs. Han woke pale, her hair streaked with new white. She no longer dared enter the bedroom, sitting curled up instead in the main hall. From then on, the La household sank into complete terror. The air grew so heavy that anyone who stepped inside felt their skin crawl. And the villagers all believed Lan's spirit had not forgiven them, that this was only the beginning. Ever since the night the entire village heard the cries of a baby coming from the La household, everyone became convinced that Lan's spirit had returned. No one dared pass by the Zhang Canal after sunset. Boatmen and vendors alike chose the long detour, even if it meant walking more than a kilometer. In the evenings, the La house lay in an eerie silence. Neither Mrs. Han nor Tam could eat or sleep. They burned incense almost constantly. The thick, choking smoke filling the air. That night, the crescent moon hung low behind the line of Melaleuca trees. Mist drifting pale and heavy. Crickets and frogs called in chorus. Then, amid the stillness, the sound of a baby's cry broke out. At first, it was faint, like a kitten mewling, but it grew louder and louder, wailing with sorrow that chilled the blood. Mrs. Han clutched her head, trembling. "Oh God, she's back again." Tam gripped a butcher's knife and stepped onto the porch. The moon's dim glow revealed the hammock swaying. A thin figure sat in it, long hair veiling her face, water dripping steadily to the ground. He hissed, "What do you want, Lan?" The figure gave no reply, only swayed gently with the hammock. Then, the sound of a baby's cry rose directly at Tam's feet. Startled, he stumbled back, the knife slipping from his grasp. Mrs. Han crawled out from inside, collapsing to her knees. "Lan, forgive me, I'm old. I can't take this anymore." Suddenly, the hammock stilled. The figure slowly dissolved into the night, leaving behind only a puddle of water. Yet the crying of the infant continued to echo through the yard. That entire night, Mrs. Han huddled in a corner, too afraid to close her eyes. She heard the sound of a baby crawling across the floor, the scraping of fingernails clawing against the wooden walls. Tam lay on a mat in the front room, his back drenched in cold sweat despite the mild weather. The next morning, a few neighbors came to check on them. As soon as they stepped into the yard, they saw muddy tracks stretching from the gate all the way to the doorway. An old woman shook her head and sighed. "It's no use. Her spirit is too strong. This household will never know peace." Tam leaned against a post, hollow-eyed, his beard unkempt. He drank constantly, ignoring his mother's scolding. He only muttered, "I'll only be at peace when she forgives me." But that night, the crying returned, this time right beside his ear. He opened his eyes to see a small shadow crawling across the floor toward him. It stopped at the edge of his mat and lifted its head. It was the face of a newborn, purple, lifeless, eyes wide open. Tam screamed, kicking off his blanket and bolting outside. Mrs. Han rushed after him, only to see a large puddle in the center of the yard. Reflected in it was Lan's figure, standing still, her belly swollen as if ready to give birth, arms cradling it protectively. Mrs. Han wailed, "Lan, I beg you, I'll make offerings for you, please. Spare me." But Lan's shadow only receded slowly before vanishing. The next morning, Mrs. Han brought an entire tray of offerings to the canal: a boiled chicken, a plate of sticky rice, 3 cups of white wine. She bowed until her forehead swelled, praying desperately for Lan to let them go. But when she returned home, a muddy handprint had appeared on the altar table, a reminder that nothing was over. All that day, Mrs. Han wandered like a ghost. That night, she dreamed of being dragged into the mud, suffocating, unable to cry for help. When she woke, her clothes were drenched, smeared with real mud. Tam fared no better. He was plagued by visions, seeing Lan's shadow standing behind him in the mirror, finding fresh wet footprints in the yard that led to the canal. Both of them lived as though trapped between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. On the third night after the cries first echoed, the wind suddenly rose, black clouds swallowed the sky, the moon disappeared, and the entire village of Kat Tuong sank into suffocating darkness. Inside the La household, Mrs. Han lit more incense, the acrid smoke stinging her eyes. She knelt before the family altar, mumbling frantic prayers. Out on the porch, Tam clutched a bottle of liquor, gulping it down in great swigs as though it could wash away his fear. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Both of them jumped. Who would come at this hour? Tam muttered. He stepped forward and opened it. Nothing but thick darkness, and the stench of mud. When he turned back, the earthen floor was soaked. Small footprints, like those of an infant, led straight into the middle room. Mrs. Han trembled. She's inside already. From the inner chamber came the creaking of the hammock, swaying though no one sat in it. Mrs. Han's face drained of color as she crawled backward. A white figure appeared in the hammock, hair spilling over her face. From the shadows came a lullaby. soft and broken, choked with sorrow. Oh, vi do cao van dong den. Tam staggered back, drenched in sweat, snatching up a butcher's knife. He hurled it at the figure. The blade cut through the hammock and lodged deep in the floorboards. The white shape vanished instantly. For a moment, they thought it was over. But then the shrill cry of a baby erupted from the kitchen. The door banged open on its own, wind sweeping out with the stench of swamp water. Mrs. Han clutched her chest, gasping, pleading, "Lan, I was wrong. I accept all the blame. Please, don't harm me." But the crying only grew louder, drowning out even the wind. The oil lamp flickered violently, then died. The house sank into pitch blackness. Desperate, Tam struck a match. In its feeble glow, he saw muddy handprints smeared across the floor, trailing from the kitchen door right up to his feet. He screamed and dropped the match. Darkness swallowed everything. That entire night, Mrs. Han burned with feverish terror. She dreamed of Lan standing at the foot of her bed, cradling a bundle wrapped in white cloth. When she asked what it was, Lan unwrapped it, a lifeless infant, purple and silent, staring wide-eyed at her. From the child's mouth poured thick, black mud, spreading across the bed and rising around her legs. Mrs. Han jolted awake, the stench of decay in her mouth. Looking down, she saw real wet streaks of mud across the mattress. She screamed and ran into the yard, slapping her own face as if trying to wake from the nightmare. Neighbors, hearing her cries, rushed over. An old man shook his head. "She's possessed. Unless they hold a ritual soon, she won't survive." The next day, Mrs. Han summoned a shaman from the neighboring village. He set up an altar, lit incense, and beat a wooden bell. But as he began chanting, the wind roared, scattering the offerings. A jar of wine spilled, reeking like blood. The shaman paled, stepping back. "This spirit's grudge is too heavy. I dare not stay. The family must face this themselves." He fled that very night, leaving Mrs. Han collapsed at the door, weeping. The following evening, people discovered the canal in front of the La household filled with dead fish, their bloated bodies floating and stinking. Terror gripped the villagers, who vowed to keep away. That night, Tam heard a whisper right beside his ear. "Give me back my child." He jolted upright, flailing in the dark. No one was there, but when he turned toward the door, muddy words were smeared across the wall. "Give back my child, asterisk." He screamed and smashed everything in sight. Mrs. Han could only clutch her head and sob. The horror had driven them both to the edge of madness. That evening, dark clouds gathered as if driven by unseen hands. Thunder cracked, lightning flashed, and the wind whipped the Melaleuca leaves into a furious roar. Mrs. Han no longer had the strength to pray. She lay curled up in her chamber, eyes wide open with terror. Night fell, and rain poured down in torrents. The waters of the Zhang Canal swelled, churning thick and muddy. Lightning flashed again and again, illuminating the La household like a haunted silhouette in the storm. Tam sat in the middle of the house, an empty bottle of liquor rolling beside him. Each time the lightning struck, he glimpsed Lan standing at the doorway, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes soaked through. This time she did not vanish. She simply stood, staring at him. "Go away, I beg you," Tam screamed, hurling a chair at the white figure. The chair smashed against a post, splintering apart. Lan remained, her eyes glowing red in the dark. From the inner room, Mrs. Han suddenly burst into laughter. It was shrill, unearthly, nothing like her own voice. She stumbled out, hair wild, eyes crazed. "You want the child? Here, take it." She lunged at the altar, sweeping the incense burner aside. Ash filled the air, the smoke snuffed out. At that instant, a freezing gust blew through the house. The oil lamps died, plunging everything into darkness. A baby's cry pierced the night. Not one voice, but many, echoing from every corner of the house. Dozens of cries rose together, shrill and mournful. Mrs. Han collapsed to her knees, covering her ears, screaming, "Stop crying, please, stop." Tam clutched his head, smashing it against a wooden post. Blood streamed down his face. mixing with the rain blowing into the house. Thunder roared, lightning split the sky, and for one brief moment the room blazed bright. In that light, Lan stood in the center of the house, her belly swollen as if ready to give birth. Water streamed from her body, pooling beneath her feet. She opened her mouth, her voice colder than the grave. "You killed me, now you will pay." Mrs. Han shrieked. "It wasn't me. He made me do it." She pointed at Tam. Lan's gaze fell upon him. He trembled, stumbling back against the wall. She stepped forward, each footfall leaving wet prints on the floor. Suddenly, from outside came the faint cry of a child, "Mama." The sound stretched long, mournful. The front door burst open, wind howling through. From the yard, muddy handprints crawled across the floor. Reaching inside, Mrs. Han screamed, collapsing to the ground. Her eyes rolled back as her body convulsed. When Tam tried to help her, he saw her palms coated with mud. The mud crept up her face, spreading over her eyes. She clawed at her skin, blood mixing with dirt. "She's here. She's clinging to me." Tam dragged her into the rain. Lightning flashed, and he saw black handprints pressed across her face, as if someone had gripped her skull. She rolled on the ground, laughing and sobbing at once, then suddenly bolted, sprinting toward the canal. He chased her but slipped in the mud. By the time he looked up, she was standing at the canal's edge, hair streaming, her mouth twisted in a manic grin. Behind her stood Lan, silent, reaching out a hand as though beckoning. Mrs. Han let out one final, despairing scream before hurling herself into the muddy waters. "Mother!" Tam fell to his knees, wailing in the storm, but her body was gone. Beneath the swirling waters, lightning lit up Lan's face, smiling coldly, her eyes deep and hollow, pulling Tam into their darkness. He collapsed, clutching his head, as the cries of infants rose all around him, drowning out the storm. By morning, the villagers learned the news. Mrs. Han had vanished in the night. No body was found. They whispered that anyone passing the Zhang Canal that night saw a pale figure perched on a Melaleuca branch, cradling a white bundle, rocking gently as she sang a lullaby. After the stormy night, the Le household looked abandoned. Weeds choked the yard, and the air reeked of mildew. The family altar stood bare, incense long extinguished. Only Tam wandered through the shadows, staggering like a walking corpse. The villagers whispered warnings, no one daring to approach. They claimed that each night, the oil lamps inside the house flared to life on their own. The cradle creaked as though rocking, and a woman's lullaby drifted in and out with the wind. Parents hushed their children quickly if they cried after dark, afraid the sound might draw something from the Zhang Canal. Tam drowned himself in liquor, his eyes sunken and ringed with darkness, his skin ashen. Sleep no longer came. Whenever he closed his eyes, he dreamed of Lan thrashing in the water, her arms reaching out to drag him under. One afternoon, lying in the front room, he heard the steady drip of water. Looking up, he saw black stains spreading across the ceiling, dark liquid dripping onto his face. He wiped at it, but the stench grew stronger, metallic and foul. Then, before his eyes, a muddy handprint emerged on the ceiling, its outline deepening as if pressed from above. He screamed, flung a chair aside, and bolted into the yard. There, in the middle of the courtyard, a pool of thick mud bubbled violently. From its surface, a pale hand slowly reached upward, clutching a mud-stained scrap of cloth. It flung the cloth at his feet. When Tam bent to pick it up, his blood ran cold. It was Lan's ba-ba blouse, the very one she had worn the night she died. It was still drenched, icy, as though just dredged from the canal. Terrified, he tried to hurl it away, but it clung to his hand as if someone were holding it. He shrieked, slamming his hand against posts and walls until the fabric tore apart and finally dropped. That night, he dared not sleep inside. Dragging a cot to the porch, he clutched a machete and lay awake, waiting for dawn. But at midnight, a lullaby began to drift through the air. "Hush, hush, mama, don't leave me." The song grew closer. A wind swept through, and the hammock inside began to sway on its own. Out of the darkness stepped the figure of a woman, cradling a white bundle. With each step, water dripped from her body, spattering onto the floor. She stopped before him, bowing her head. From within the bundle came the shriek of a baby. Tam clamped his hands over his ears and howled, "Spare me, I beg you." Lan lifted her face. Her eyes were hollow black pools, blood streaming from their corners. A cold smile spread across her lips. She raised one arm, pointing silently toward the canal. Tam dropped his machete and fled. When he reached the bank, he froze. Reflected in the water was his own face, but with Lan's blackened eyes staring back. He screamed, stumbling into the mud. The next morning, villagers found him sitting dazed by the canal, his body caked in slime, his eyes vacant. When they asked what had happened, he only laughed, a hoarse, broken laugh that sounded more like weeping. From that day on, Tam vanished from village life. He no longer went to market, no longer spoke to anyone. Each night, neighbors heard crashes and manic screams from the house. One brave soul peeked through and saw Tam crouched in the yard, scrawling circles in the mud, muttering over and over, "Give me back the child, give me back the child." Word spread quickly. Tam had gone mad, possessed by Lan's spirit. No one dared go near the cursed house again. That night, though no rain fell, the fog lay thick over Kat Tuong village. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint rasp of insects. In the household, Tam sat huddled by the doorway, eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness. The empty liquor bottle beside him gleamed in the lamplight. Suddenly, he heard the sound of water trickling inside the house. At first, he thought it was a drunken hallucination, but the noise grew louder, like buckets being poured onto the floor. Grabbing an oil lamp, he crept into the main room. Its dim flame revealed a black puddle spreading across the ground. Bubbles rose from the water, and then a pale hand broke the surface. Clutching the wooden boards, another hand followed. Slowly, a body emerged, Lan. Her hair hung in drenched clumps across her face. Her torn clothes clung to her swollen belly, still round as if she were carrying a child. Tam staggered back, stammering, Please, let me go." Lan said nothing. She crawled forward, dripping, each step soaking the floorboards. Tam shrieked, hurling the lamp. It shattered, flames bursting for an instant, only to sputter out as though drowned. Darkness swallowed the room again. Then, ice swept across his back. An unseen force slammed him face first to the ground. Sharp nails raked across his skin. He writhed and screamed until his voice broke. When he pulled up his shirt, 5 bloody gouges ran across his back, raw as if carved by claws. The following night, it returned. This time, the gashes cut deeper, bleeding through his clothes. He pressed forest leaves against the wounds, but they refused to heal. Instead, they festered with a sickly stench. Tam's spirit withered. He no longer shouted, only sat curled in the corner, eyes fixed blankly on the door. Lan's figure appeared again and again, standing in the courtyard, arms cradling a white bundle. Whenever Tam met her gaze, she shook her head slowly, as if to say, "It isn't over." One night, he jolted awake beneath crushing weight. Opening his eyes, he saw Lan straddling his chest. Her eyes were bottomless black, her lips twisted into a ghastly smile. She pressed her hand to his throat and squeezed. He thrashed helplessly, lungs burning. In a frenzy, he grasped the machete beside his bed and slashed wildly. At that moment, the oil lamp flared to life. No one was there. The blade was lodged deep in the wooden wall, but bruises ringed his neck, 5 dark fingerprints, small yet suffocating. At dawn, villagers heard the crash of furniture. Peering in, they saw Tam dragging everything into the yard, even the ancestral altar. He screamed hoarsely, "Get out! I won't worship you anymore. If you want me, kill me." The people shook their heads and kept their distance. To them, Tam was no longer human, but possessed. That night, a few dared sneak close. They watched the door swing open by itself, lamplight flickering faintly inside, and from within came the sound of a lullaby, slow, steady, crooning as though rocking Tam into an eternal sleep. The night sky was heavy and dark, the wind howling through the Kajaput forest like screams torn from the earth. The household sat in shadows, lit only by a faint oil lamp flickering in the main room. Tam crouched in the courtyard, his eyes glazed, his hands crusted with dried blood. The stench of mud and iron filled the air until he could no longer tell what was real and what was nightmare. Close to midnight, the hammock inside began to creak. The air grew piercingly cold, his breath fogging into white mist. Tam staggered to his feet, clutching the dull blade in his hand, and stepped into the main room. The hammock swayed gently. Resting on it was a white bundle of cloth. It stirred, writhing, before the shrill cry of a baby burst from within, not mournful this time, but high-pitched, tearing through the night. Shaking, Tam edged closer. With trembling hands, he opened the bundle. Inside lay a bluish infant, its eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight into his. Its lips moved, and instead of a cry, a thin voice rasped, "Father!" Tam screamed and hurled the bundle away. It hit the ground and dissolved into a pool of thick, black mud. From that muck rose Lan. She stood slowly, water streaming from her body, each step leaving dark, wet prints across the floor. Her eyes were bottomless voids, but within them flickered a fury that burned hotter than flame. "Lan, I'm sorry," Tam stammered, voice cracked, retreating step by step. She gave no reply. She raised her hand, palm open, streaked with black sludge, then pointed upward, to the beam where a rope now dangled, one he swore had never been there before. Tam shook his head violently, trembling. "No, I don't want to die." Lan advanced, and a sudden gust blasted through the house, snuffing the lamp. The world fell into suffocating darkness. An invisible grip seized his throat. Ice-cold fingers clawed at the nape of his neck, dragging him toward the rope. He fought, scratching at the air, but his feet shuffled forward as though pulled by unseen chains. From the shadows, a lullaby floated, soft and steady, as though lulling him into eternal rest. "Hush, hush, sleep soundly, my child," Tam gasped, his eyes bulging. He climbed onto a stool, hands trembling as they brushed the rough rope. Cold sweat streamed down his face, mixing with blood seeping from the gouges on his back. Just then, lightning split the sky, flooding the house with white glare. In that instant, he saw Lan standing directly before him, her pregnant belly swollen, her lips twisted into a ghastly smile. Behind her crawled dozens of pale childlike figures, their eyes burning like coals. The wind shrieked, the cries of infants wailed. The hammock creaked violently, blending into a chorus of the damned. Tam let out a final, blood-curdling scream and clutched the rope tight. That night, all of Kat Tuong village heard his scream rip through the storm. By the time they gathered, the house was pitch black, its door gaping open. Wet footprints trailed from the courtyard all the way to the canal's edge. Tam was gone, but inside the main room, the rope still swung gently. On the floor beneath, a pool of black water shimmered, and in its reflection, Lan's face smiled coldly. The next morning, the villagers of Kat Tuong gathered at the lane outside the household. The storm had left the ground soggy, mud thick and heavy, footprints stamped from the yard all the way to the Zhang Canal. None dared to step inside. They stood at a distance, whispering uneasily. "Last night I heard a scream," old Mrs. Hyde Tin murmured, trembling. It sounded like someone's throat being cut. "That house hasn't known peace in a long time," an old man muttered, leaning on his cane. The lamps went out, the hammock creaked, and the crying of children filled the night. "The spirits come back." By noon, Tam appeared at the doorway. He was gaunt, his eyes hollow, hair matted, shirt caked with mud. The villagers fell silent. He stared back at them, lips curling into a crooked smile. Not a word was spoken. Everyone drifted away in chilled silence. Tam no longer ate or drank. He only sat in the yard, unmoving. At night, he went to the canal's edge and stared into the water. Some swore they saw him whispering to the currents, as though conversing with someone unseen. One evening, old Mr. Nam paddled his boat past and spotted Tam kneeling at the bank, hands clasped in prayer. "Tam, what are you doing there, son?" he called. Tam turned. His face was pale as bone, eyes red and raw. He smiled faintly. I'm greeting my wife and my child. They're down there. A chill ripped through Mr. Nam's spine. He dug his oar deep and rowed away as fast as he could. That night, a lullaby rose across the Kajaput forest, so clear that the entire village heard it. Children woke screaming. Dogs howled endlessly. The house glowed, not with lamplight, but with a sickly green luminescence like swarming fireflies. A long-haired figure drifted across the yard, paused before the doorway, and vanished. Inside, Tam lay sprawled on the floor, eyes wide, unblinking. He felt Lan standing beside him. She hummed softly, her voice like knives. Hush, hush, child, sleep soundly. Your father will pay the blood debt. Tam shuddered, whispering through cracked lips. I'll pay soon. Just don't drag me down. Let me die in this house. Suddenly, the windows flew open though no wind stirred. The stench of mud swept inside, suffocating. Across the walls, black handprints appeared, climbing higher and higher, as if something were scaling the room. From the rafters, drops of water fell steadily onto the tiles below. Clutching his head, Tam howled. He smashed his forehead against the post until blood ran down his face. But the lullaby lingered, sweet and mocking, through the long hours until dawn. He sat slumped against the wall, eyes ringed black, waiting for the light of morning. The following night, the moon hung dimly in the sky. The village of Kat Tuong lay still, broken only by the rasping chirp of crickets. Inside the cold, desolate household, Tam lay on a bamboo cot, drenched in sweat. A soft voice drifted from the yard, low and beckoning. Tam, come out? Tam. The voice was familiar, gentle, yet distant, echoing like it came from the far side of the grave. Trembling, he staggered to the porch. Moonlight revealed the yard slick and wet, as if rain had just fallen. In the middle of the yard stood a woman in a white al-ba-ba. Her long hair veiled her face. Her shadow stretched sharp beneath the moon. But her feet, they did not touch the ground. Floating just above it, Lan, Tam croaked, voice hoarse. She gave no reply, only raised a hand toward the gate. As though hypnotized, he followed. Each step pounded in his chest. His feet icy cold. He reached the edge of the Zhang Canal, where the wind whistled sharp. The water's surface was unnaturally calm, flat as a mirror. Then bubbles rose in circles, and from below a pale hand thrust upward. Groping, Tam screamed, toppling back, but he did not run. An invisible force pulled him to the bank. Peering down, he saw Lan standing at the bottom, hair floating loose, belly swollen, eyes wide and unblinking. Return, my child. Her voice rang, this time as if she were breathing against his ear. Tam broke down, sobbing, bowing to the mud. Forgive me, I beg you. It was a mistake. Her gaze did not waver. The canal water darkened, churning foul. Dozens of fish, snakeheads, catfish, bobbed lifeless to the surface. Bellies bloated, twitching before going still. The sickly stench drove him mad. He bolted for the house. But on the walls, words smeared in mud appeared before him. Return life, return blood, return child. Shaking, he clawed at them, but the more he scraped, the more words appeared. That night he dared not sleep. He huddled in the corner, eyes wide, listening to dragging footsteps circling the house until dawn. The next morning, villagers saw him at the market. His face was hollow, clothes stained. He stood in the center, laughing like a lunatic before screaming. She's not dead. Lan's waiting by the canal. Someone save me. The market froze silent. A few men dragged him home. But every villager thought the same. Tam was already possessed. That night, the calling came again. Not one voice, but two, Lan's and the wailing of a child. He collapsed onto the floor, clutching his ears, but the sound burrowed into his skull. From within the house came the creak of a hammock swaying, though none had been there for years. Grinding his teeth, he bound the door shut with rope, locking himself in the chamber. But at midnight, the rope split with a crack. As if cut, the door swung open. Lan stood on the threshold. This time her face was clear, no longer a wavering specter, but flesh, a corpse-like woman, skin bluish, eyes sunken deep. She smiled, a chilling curve of lips. "Come with me," she whispered. Tam rose. Entranced, he stepped into the yard without resistance. His feet splashed through black puddles. The trail leading straight to the canal. It was late at night, and a light drizzle began to fall. The wind howled through the Melaleuca forest, carrying a chilling sound. Tam stood hunched under the porch, his face pale as death. He knew that tonight Lan would call again. From the village road came the slapping sound of wet sandals. A figure staggered closer. It was Twee. Her hair hung in matted strands, clothes soaked through. Her face was ghostly pale, dark circles sinking deep beneath her eyes. "Tam," Thai's voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Help me, it's following me, it won't let me go." Tam backed away, his face twisted in fear. Why did you come here?" Twee trembled, stepping into the yard before collapsing to her knees. "I saw her. She stands at the foot of my bed every night, her hair dripping, her eyes full of blood. I can't take it anymore." Suddenly, a whirlwind rose up, snuffing out the oil lamp. The air grew thick, heavy, and cold as ice. In the middle of the yard, a white figure appeared. Lan stood there, her hair dripping, her eyes glowing red. Twee screamed, clutching her head. "Don't come closer. I'm sorry." Lan said nothing. Water spread out from her feet, flooding across the yard toward Twee. The muddy water frothed with bubbles. From within it, dozens of tiny hands reached up, clawing at Thai's legs. She kicked and thrashed, but the hands only gripped tighter, dragging her inch by inch toward the gate. "Tam, help me," she screamed, her fingernails raking the dirt bloody. Tam stood frozen, sweat pouring down his face. He wanted to run to her, but his legs felt nailed to the ground. Lan only smiled, a terrifying grin curling her lips. She raised a hand and pointed toward the Zhang Canal. At once, an invisible force yanked Twee out of the yard, dragging her across the muddy path. Her screams echoed into the storm. Panic-stricken, Tam finally broke free and ran after her. At the canal's edge, he saw Twee being pulled under the water. She struggled, mouth wide open to breathe, but only thick bubbles of mud spewed out. The water churned violently, frothing and boiling. Lan stepped into the canal, wading toward Twee. She grabbed Thai's hair and forced her head beneath the surface. Tam shouted, voice cracking, "No, don't, spare her, spare her." But his cries were swept away by the wind. Within moments, the water fell silent again. Twee was gone, only a scarf floated aimlessly on the surface. Lan turned her head toward Tam. Her eyes were pits of black. "The white's gone." Slowly, she spoke. "Your turn." The words rang out like thunder. Tam collapsed, his body trembling violently. He crawled backward, stammering, I'll pay, just don't take me tonight." Lan vanished into the rain. But from the canal bank, a trail of wet footprints appeared, leading straight back to the La house. That night, Tam did not sleep. He sat staring for hours at the rope already hanging in the middle chamber. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lan's face, pregnant belly, a chilling smile carved across her lips, the creak of a hammock, the sound of a lullaby, and the drip of water echoed through the house. Tam knew his time was running out. The night was pitch dark, the wind whistling through the Melaleuca forest like hushed whispers. The entire village of Kad Tuong kept their doors shut. No one dared step outside. The La house stood in eerie silence, broken only by the dripping of the thatched roof and the distant sound of water flowing from the Zhang Canal. Tam sat in the yard, eyes wide open, his whole body trembling. He knew the time had come. He would have to face Lan. Every gust of wind carried with it the sound of a lullaby, echoing in his ears. "Hush, hush, mother rocks her child to sleep." He rose to his feet and walked into the middle chamber. The rope had been hanging from the ceiling beam for days. Before him was nothing but suffocating darkness. As he lifted his head, a pale figure emerged from the front room. Lan appeared. Her long hair hung wet and heavy, her clothes torn to shreds, her belly still swollen as if pregnant. Her eyes blazed red, the depth of her stare sending an icy chill through Tam. "You," Lan's voice was cold, devoid of emotion. "You killed me, now you will pay." Tam dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "Please, I'm sorry. I regret everything." Lan gave no reply. She stepped forward slowly, each footfall dripping water onto the floor, mixing with the dried stains of blood from the scratches carved into Tam's flesh before. He knew there was no escape. His eyes darted to the rope dangling above. In his mind flashed the visions of Lan, of his mother Han, of Tui, and the crying children, haunting. Merciless. His heart pounded as he staggered forward. Lan stood motionless, her eyes glowing like fire. Fixed upon him, Tam gripped the rope, whispering a prayer, though no tears came. "Give me back my child?" Lan's voice boomed now, reverberating through the house. His reason collapsed, hands shaking. He climbed onto the chair. Cold sweat streamed down, mingling with the dried blood across his back. He gasped for breath, casting one last look around the house. Phantoms filled his vision, his mother with wild, tangled hair, Tui kneeling in despair, pale children screaming soundlessly. Lan moved closer and gently laid her hand on his shoulder. Tam shuddered violently. The dim oil lamp flickered, throwing eerie white shadows across the walls. Exhausted and defeated, Tam let go. The rope tightened around his neck, pulling him upward. The wind howled through the rafters. The lullaby echoed faintly, and the rope groaned under his weight. Moments later, silence fell. By morning, the villagers of Kat Tuong found the house empty. The rope still swayed gently from the beam, and on the floor, 5 black handprints were etched deep, a grim reminder that justice had been served. They whispered afterward that whenever the moon rose, the sound of a child's cries could still be heard from the Melaleuca forest, a chilling reminder of a mother's grief, and the unyielding law of karma that spares no one. From that day, the La House was abandoned, cursed, and feared. It stood as a warning about the cruelty of greed and the merciless consequences of taking an innocent life. The La House was abandoned, overgrown with wild grass, its thatched roof torn and ragged. No one in the village of Kat Tuong dared to go near it, especially on nights when the moon was dim. The sound of a lullaby and the cries of a child still echoed steadily from the Melaleuca forest, reaching the ears of anyone curious enough to linger nearby. One afternoon, old Mr. Nam rowed his boat past the Zhang Canal and glanced toward the La House. In the mud, he saw tiny footprints, like those of a small child, etched deeply. As if crawling out of the house, a chill ran down his spine, and he paddled away quickly, later retelling the story to the villagers. Everyone was horrified, none dared approach the place again. Some who snuck close peered through the window and saw the bowl of rice on Lan's altar shifting on its own. At first, they thought it was the wind, but when they looked more carefully, the bowl shook, and the water inside spilled onto the table, forming the shape of a tiny handprint. A pale figure flickered in and out of sight inside the house, a woman with long, soaked hair, her pitch-black eyes staring directly outward. Villagers claimed that one night, Mrs. Hong, a neighbor, saw Lan sitting in the hammock, murmuring, "Give me back my child." But when she rushed closer, the house was empty, no one inside. Children in the village, especially those who dared to play near the canal, often came home crying, mumbling the word, "Mother," even when no one was around. Some adults tried to investigate, only to find the canal water murky and the Melaleuca branches shifting strangely, as if something unseen was moving beneath. On rainy nights, the villagers heard wet, squelching footsteps circling the La House, mingled with harsh, hollow laughter and the cries of children. They swore that a pale, greenish light flickered from within the house, even though no lamp had been lit. Mr. Nam, the only one bold enough to draw near, once told a chilling story. From afar, he saw Lan carrying her unborn child in her arms, pacing across the yard. When he looked closely, he realized the child's eyes glowed blood red, just like Lan's. She set the baby down on the ground, her face twisting into a ghastly smile, before vanishing into the rain. The signs of haunting grew stronger each day. The rice bowl spun on its own. The stench of mud and decay filled the middle chamber even though no one entered. The altar trembled, and strands of children's hair scattered across the floor despite the still air. Villagers whispered to one another, "Lan and her child are still here." A reminder of karma and the agony of a stolen life. The house became a symbol of dread and taboo. No one dared live there, and only the reckless ever ventured close. Those who glimpsed Lan's ghost or her unborn child were plagued with sleepless nights, haunted for the rest of their lives. The family house is now nothing more than overgrown weeds and a tattered thatched roof. The rotting wooden gate hangs loose, swaying with the wind. No one in Kat Tuong village dares to step inside, especially on rainy nights, when the lullabies and cries echoing from the Melaleuca forest sound so clear they chill every listener. Villagers recall that once, a group of daring young men tried to enter the house. They saw wet footprints all over the floor, leading straight to the canal bank. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the upper floor, followed by a sigh and a raspy laugh. When they looked up, they saw the shadow of a woman with long, dripping hair glide past the window before vanishing. Children in the village still whisper that at night they hear a lullaby. "Hush, hush," mother lulls her child to sleep. "Give my child back to me." Anyone who hears that lullaby suffers nightmares filled with water, mud, and drifting white shadows. Some adults, when watching from afar, swear they saw a pale greenish light flickering in the middle chamber of the house, even though no lamp was ever lit. One day, old man Nam rowed his boat past the Zhang Canal and glanced toward the house. On the water's surface, he saw the reflection of Lan's face, her hair wet, her eyes black with a burning red glow. Smiling, beside her was the faint figure of a small child, its eyes blazing red like blood. Standing silently, shaken to his core, he rowed back to the village in terror. And from then on no one dared to go near. The story of Lan and her unborn child became a legend. It is said that anyone brave, or foolish, enough to enter the house on a dim moonlit night will hear a baby's cries drifting from the Melaleuca forest, dragging footsteps circling the house, and two glowing red eyes staring out from the darkness. Those who once dared to live near the place never lasted. By the next morning, they had fled, faces pale, eyes sunken, unable to utter a word. Anyone who glimpsed Lan and her unborn child carried that memory for life. The villagers warn each other, Lan and her child are proof of karmic justice. Those who harm the innocent must pay. For restless spirits never forgive. The house became forbidden ground. Even now, the endless Melaleuca forest still echoes with sorrowful cries, reminding all of a mother's agony when her life was stolen. Today, Lan's story is still told, passed down from generation to generation. No one in the village forgets that beneath the forest and the waters of the Zhang Canal, Lan's spirit still lingers, and her unborn child still exists in the shadows, waiting for the greedy or the cruel to step near. With the dark forest and the lullabies that echo through rainy nights, Lan's tale has become an undying horror legend, a reminder that sin and greed always carry consequences, and that a mother's pain can outlast even death. This story ends here. Thank you for listening until the very end. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. It is a great source of encouragement for us to create more haunting ghost stories for you. If you have any questions or notice any mistakes in the tale, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and *Shadows in the Night will see you again in the next story.